You can either die a hero or live long enough to become your nickname. Welcome to American Esoterica. If history class gives you the suit, this is the tie, the essential stuff in between, the personalities, events, and other ephemera that shape our history and culture. I'm Brian Powers. It may well be that our destinies are already written by the time we receive our first gift, our name. After all, you elect a person with the name of John F. Kennedy president, not one named Dingus McGillicuddy. And if your name is Dinwoody Chucklebuck, you're not going to get elected dog catcher. Maybe it's the same way with nicknames. They might have a way of sealing your fate. And if you don't believe me, come hear the story of the man known as Conotocarious. The years immediately preceding Bacon's rebellion in the late 17th century were nasty. Native American tribes such as the Susquehannock were forced southward by others in the Iroquois Nation, where they settled in and around Maryland and Virginia. The colonists in these areas were pushing further and further out in search of more land to grow native cash crops, and they didn't really give a whit that they were encroaching on lands that the British Crown had set aside for the Native Americans. This overcrowding led to constant clashes between the parties. The Native Americans were dealing with their own disputes between different factions, some of whom were more likely to attack the European settlers than others. To the colonists, though, they were all basically viewed as the same. Bacon's rebellion would occur when a man with the same name as a beloved breakfast food would lead an army of citizens against the colonial governor of Virginia because he refused to drive all the Native Americans out of Virginia instead of merely enslaving them. To be clear, no side in this was for actually just, leaving them alone and staying off of their lands. The year before Bacon's rebellion, members of one group of Native American peoples killed 2 settlers and destroyed their fields and cattle. A militia tracked them down and killed 10 of them because, in the words of Sean Connery, that's the Chicago way. But then another militia kept the killing up, attacking a cabin full of folks from the completely different and friendly towards the local settlers Susquehannock tribe, killing 14 of them before one of them was able to explain to the militia that they weren't even part of that other group. Still, the colonial governor believed they were involved, and soon the Maryland and Virginia militias, with over 1,000 members, marched to have a little discussion at the central holdout of the Susquehannock tribe, an abandoned fort erected by the colony of Maryland. There, 5 chiefs met with the militia heads in a parley and denied their involvement in the settler killings. Witnesses told the militia heads that the chiefs were lying and were actually wearing some of the clothing from the murdered settlers, so the militia just flat out slaughtered the chiefs, who had been promised a ceasefire for the parley. The militias then laid siege to the fort. This inflamed tensions on all sides and led to essentially a mini-war between the settlers and the local Native Americans. Colonel John Washington was a leader in the Virginia militia at the parley, and as he was a participant in the slaughter of the 5 chiefs, the Susquehannock gave him a nickname, Conotocarious, an Algonquin word that roughly translates into town destroyer. It wasn't given lightly either. Conotocarious was so infamous among the tribe that this name was passed down through their history. In 1753, it landed upon the head of Colonel John Washington's great-grandson. Yup, a young British soldier named George Washington. Our Washington first met up with members of the Iroquois Confederacy at the start of what would be his ill-fated missions to counter the French occupation of Ohio country, which was in what is now called the state of, say it with me, Pennsylvania. It was there that he met with members of the Oneida and Seneca tribes to form an alliance against the French. Drawing from an exceptionally strong, long historical memory, the Seneca leader Tana Cherison bestowed the nickname Conotocarious upon young George Washington immediately. That may be why Tana Cherison found him an easy mark and goaded him into attacking a French encampment and creating an international incident. But that's a story for another episode. Episode 12, Big Mistake. Washington did embrace the town destroyer nickname too. In 1755, he wrote a letter trying to convince the Oneida to resettle along the Potomac. And in the letter, he referred to himself warmly as Conotocarious. He later wrote that the Native Americans referred to him by this nickname throughout the American Revolution. Clearly, he believed it was a term of endearment and not a note of warning to the members of the Iroquois Confederacy. Still, the Oneidas proved their loyalty in the winter spanning 1777 and 1778. Washington and his army were in desperate need of good scouts, so he sent the Marquis de Lafayette to recruit Oneida warriors. The British had just destroyed an Oneida village in a major battle, so it was clear that the Oneida could no longer maintain neutrality. 47 warriors and a few others chose to join Washington's army, and that winter, they made a 250-mile trek from upstate New York to Valley Forge. The army was starving, and the Oneida brought with them between 60 and 600 bushels of corn. Not nearly enough to feed the large army, but enough to at least help. With them was a young member of the Oneida Nation named Polly Cooper. She showed the soldiers how to prepare and cook the Oneida corn, which was thicker and tougher than the usual sweet corn and took longer to prepare. She helped turn the corn into several types of meals, and the addition of new and delicious flavors likely had an effect on morale. The Oneida warriors immediately followed Lafayette into brief combat, and just as immediately suffered the loss of one Oneida named Thomas Sinovis, and maybe as many as 6. 2 others were also captured. The Oneida had proved their loyalty, but at a high cost, and a seemingly somewhat sympathetic Washington decided that the cost was too high. The Oneidas were sent back home, where they were desperately needed to protect their families from attacks by the British and British-aligned Native Americans. A few weeks after returning home, Polly Cooper was greeted at her door by 2 soldiers. These men brought Polly a gift. When she was at Valley Forge, she went into neighboring Philadelphia with some of the wives of the soldiers of the Continental Army, and the wives caught her admiring a bonnet and shawl in a store window. Polly refused payment for the services she rendered to the hungry troops at Valley Forge, so after she returned home, the soldiers and their wives, or Martha Washington or Mrs. Benjamin Franklin, the story varies, who cares, arranged to buy the shawl and bonnet and deliver them as a gift. Polly's descendants still have the shawl today. The Oneida people proved their loyalty to the revolutionary cause, with at least one of them making the ultimate sacrifice. We, of course, afterward treated all Native Americans with respect, right? Well, no. The problem at the time was that different tribes split different ways, and the differing members of the Iroquois Confederacy fought each other alongside their chosen partners. The Loyalist tribes were a constant source of attack and frustration for the rebelling colonists, and Washington wanted to do something about it. And by do something, I mean he sent General John Sullivan on a campaign to attack and destroy Loyalist Native Americans in New York by burning down every single Loyalist Iroquois village, including the Seneca tribe, that he could find in New York. At least 40 whole villages were burned down by Sullivan and his troops. Washington and his great-grandfather were given the name of Conotocarious, Town Destroyer, by the Iroquois. The first earned it through his actions. The second cemented it with his. The Iroquois Confederacy never fully recovered, but they spread the name of Washington far and wide. So powerful is their name for George Washington, our first president, that their descendants still use it. The word Conotocarious remains to this day the Iroquois way to say President of the United States. This has been American Esoterica. All sounds were made by me, Brian Powers. Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? Just want to talk about what my nickname was in high school? It definitely wasn't Pee Pants Powers. I can assure you that. Drop me a note. The address is yell@americanesoterica.com. More information on this show can be found at americanesoterica.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless America.